I was on Facebook because we were going to have a class reunion years ago.
Outed yourself as elderly. Yes.
I know.
Were you going through your value pack coupons while you were on Facebook?
I was. And this woman who I used to have a relationship with, she was a girlfriend when we were in junior high, was also on Facebook.
Yep.
And we became Facebook friends.
Okay.
And, we'd chit chat every once in a while or whatever. And then out of the blue, she announces that her daughter has had a baby and now she's a grandmother.
Okay.
And so I had to unfriend her. Because I can't be seen with people that old. I'm not that old.
Oh my God, that's really funny. I mean, my brain was going to a lot of places that story was going to go.
Yeah.
And there's just like a whole thing that's going to unravel. And you're like, no. Just this lovely woman, her daughter had a child.
Quiet, please.
And now she's a grandmother. She's very excited. And your first thought was, I can't be seen with you. I have to unfriend you.
I can't let people know I know you.
In 4.
We went to school together?
3,
No, wait.
2.
Company presents a truly terrible podcast. Welcome to Nonsense Season 2, Episode 4. I'm Jeff Parker.
I'm Skittle.
This is our take on the week's business, tech, and entertainment headlines. This time we'll look at meteorological methodology.
Which one is that? Business, tech, or entertainment?
Technically, that's tech.
Weather is tech?
Yeah, when you find out how this works, it's a ton of tech.
Can I still quit?
It's the National Day of Barkley's birth. Today we celebrate the birth of my dog, Barkley. 7 years ago, the perfect animal came into this world to show us the way to a better life, including the importance of napping, massively celebrating the arrival of anyone returning to the house, and intuitively knowing that the mailman is the spawn of Satan.
I wouldn't say that's intuitive. I mean, he literally has horns and a 666 tattoo on his back.
But none of us noticed it before Barkley was here. You talk about how smart your kids are. I'm going to talk about how smart my dog is.
Your dog is? That he could figure out that the devil's your mailman?
Sure.
The thing is, it's not holy water that works on him. It's those little value pack coupon things. They just burn his hands.
It's also Observe the Weather Day. One of the most important necessities of early man was shelter. When braving the wilds in search of food and safety, the weather was just as dangerous as the wild animals if precautions were not taken. Several thousand years ago, the early man studied the movement of the wind, the humidity in the air, and the hue of the clouds. In time, they learned the truth that bad weather was a curse from the gods that could only be assuaged by killing beautiful virgins.
So their version of the Doppler 7000 must have been something totally different.
There were screams involved, yeah.
I felt like there would have been a good role back then, whatever, 500 BC, whenever this was, for them to just be like, maybe this isn't so great being a virgin. Maybe we should do something else.
Quick, don't be a virgin. Stop being a virgin. What are you thinking?
As they're carrying you up the side of the volcano.
Also, as the priests are hauling you up to the top of the volcano, I promise you, not one of them made it as a virgin by the time they were thrown in.
And that's why it never worked.
It's also NASA's Day of Remembrance. Space exploration is perilous, yet scientists and astronauts accept this challenge bravely. This day commemorates the members of the NASA family who gave up their lives to advance the cause of space discovery. The crew members of the space missions Apollo 1, Challenger, and Columbia.
It was this time of year when I distinctly remember the Challenger breaking up, and that was not a fun day.
While we're on the topic of space endeavors, fuel tank and booster have been stood up over at USC.
Yeah, this is actually super cool. I think they stood up the fuel tank, last week, something like that?
Yeah. We should link the video in the show notes.
Oh, yeah, we should. Well, it was last week. Was there some news coverage on it? The solid rocket boosters are already standing vertical, I think, and those things aren't exactly light.
How much do they weigh? What's a solid? Now, this is empty, right?
I would hope so.
They didn't get one that was full. It's not like an Estes rocket that has the full explosives inside of it, right?
No, it's Newsom's escape plan. When the zombie apocalypse comes, he's going to go run down to the Endeavor and just fire it off. That was the plan.
Smart man. He's a very smart man.
Why is there a giant sunroof in the top of the building over the Endeavor? He's like, no reason.
What are you seeing? What are you talking about?
I don't see anything. I'm assuming they're empty. Those things are full of very toxic to humans chemicals, but it's pretty cool. It's really cool to see this, and I don't know when they're getting the Endeavor stood up, but I think it's later this year. Should be pretty exciting.
What will the total cost be to get this thing standing? This thing's really big and heavy.
Yeah. No, it was like $1,800, I think. All
wow,
in.
I had not expected it.
Yeah.
To be $1,800.
Yeah, you can't even buy half a Vision Pro for that.
Do you?
No, I think it's like.
Do you tilt it up before you build the building, or do you build the building
I would hope
first?
so. I hope they don't build the building and then go, oh shit, we forgot to put inside the fucking spacecraft.
I'm not thinking you have two small glass doors where people can come in and out, and you got to, I got to fit the rocket in there.
It's like a car dealership. I'm going to take my kids to the car dealership. I'm like, Daddy, how do I get the car in here? And you don't tell them about the big glass panel doors that open.
Sure.
No, I believe based on the little bit of video I've seen, they've got like the base of the building is built. They're going to put all the shit inside and then build the walls and the roof over it. I think that's the plan. plane.
That's fascinating. $480 million, right?
I think it's something like that. Yeah, they've raised like $300 million. It's basically $500 million, which is kind of insane. But when you think about what you're doing here, this is definitely a one-off engineering project.
Go USC. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
How's your week going?
Well, you were making me sad there. I feel like I had to follow the NASA's Day of Remembrance, but now fortunately I feel a little more excited about the Endeavour being stood up. My week so far has been good. I went and saw MJ at the Pantages, which was really fun. This is the sort of the story of Michael Jackson. It basically is a concert. I mean, you're really going to a Michael Jackson concert.
It's a jukebox musical. Am I right?
I believe so.
It's just a bunch of his songs.
But the Pantages is great, and the performance is amazing, and the choreography is amazing. The storyline is pretty thin, but that's not why you're going. It was a lot of fun.
What is the storyline? This kid from Indiana. I don't remember where he's from.
Yeah, Indiana. I think Indiana
comes and sings, and he's really good, and he gets a record deal.
Yeah, starts young, burns his hair, starts taking drugs. Drugs affect his performance. Mortgages his house for dangerous tour. Makes $1 bajillion.
Wow, good story.
There's a lot of mortgage in there. A lot of mortgage.
CBS wouldn't pay for the Beat It video.
I didn't know this.
Yeah, it was like about gangs and things, and they were in no way in. So he wrote the check himself, $150,000 to make this thing
for the video for Beat It.
Yeah, massively successful.
Extremely hard for me to think of the Beat It video without thinking about Weird Al Yankovic's Eat It video, which I also thought is awesome. Like in my mind, they get blurry.
When I think of the Beat It video, what I always think is the pool tables have no pockets.
That wasn't pool. It was a different game, right?
It's Karam billiards.
They just went down to where those really rough gangs hang out at the Karam parlor.
It's supposed to be a really hard game to play.
That's why there's gangs.
It's shot in the same place, the Morrison Hotel, where the Doors cover was shot.
Is it really?
Yeah, it was called the Hard Rock Cafe. It's the same place that gave the inspiration for the name for the London restaurant.
There's Karam tables in there?
Apparently.
I mean, I know you had to do it on a budget.
I can't imagine they brought in, hey, you know what, let's bring in some Karam tables here.
The first location they were gonna shoot at was ping pong tables. And like, can we get something a little more gruff? And they were like, well, we have these Karam tables.
Well, we have to go back a couple of weeks to an episode called The Pause That Refreshes. We talked about putting out items that help birds make nests. We have been alerted not to put out hair for birds' nests, human hair. The tiny baby's feet and legs can get tangled in the hair, and they can't get out of the nest, and they die there. Generally, dried grasses and natural fibers are okay. Stick to natural materials in the natural environment for that species. Household stuff is a bad idea. String, twine, yarn are all bad, as well as fabrics that contain those things. I'll put a link about this in the show notes. We love learning about all things, so keep us alert. If we say things that are crazy, let us know.
So wait, I'm not supposed to put out the whiskey and the salami and the little baby jacuzzi that I put out for them? That's not?
Well, I might come over.
I'd love to see you get into the bird jacuzzi. Your wrist dangling in the bird jacuzzi. As an update on this, they are still destroying my furniture.
Are they?
Yes, I would like some advice.
They're very sophisticated birds with furniture.
Yeah, they just want something from Restoration Hardware is really what they want. Actually, I have real owls that live in the trees, but apparently there's not enough to deter the birds.
Shall we get to our headlines?
Please be a no Musk day. Please be a no Musk day.
A Boeing passenger jet's nose wheel fell off just before takeoff. This has nothing to do with Elon Musk.
Oh, fuck. All of a sudden, talking about Musk sounds better.
Yeah.
I am generally the one who delivers the nasty aviation stories, and I'm usually pretty comfortable with them. This one in particular strikes me as really bad. Really, really bad.
Well, clearly there were lots of bolts, and then there were fewer bolts, and then eventually there was one bolt.
No bolts.
And that bolt went away, and the wheel rolled away. They saw the wheel roll away down the runway.
982, Roger. If you'd like to start your taxi down the runway, and just let me know.
Roger that. Delta 982, this is the aircraft looking at you. One of your nose tires just came off. It just rolled off the runway behind you.
This literally happened in Atlanta. This was on, what, a 7.5, right? A 757?
Correct. And there were 200 people loaded on board waiting to take off.
And it was an old-ass plane. It was like a 32-year-old plane.
1992,
in 92, yeah. So it's an old plane. Still... Because, like, you wouldn't know if you were on the plane. I don't think there's a wheel-off sensor. I think they skipped that one, right? Like, there's not, like, a sensor for,
you would like to
wing
think
off.
we could all just assume that the wheels are there. So they took the passengers off and then put them on a replacement flight. There were no injuries. All that was fine.
I think the plane sat.
The plane went back into service the next day.
Yeah, they couldn't find the bolt. They just put the wheel back on.
Hopefully it brought some new bolts in.
No, just put a coat hanger in there. It'll be fine.
Atlanta Airport holds the title of the world's busiest with 93 million passengers.
Yeah, this is nuts.
A year.
I think this thing was literally on the runway for like 3 hours. And my hunch is they did not come take the passengers off an active runway. My hunch is they left them on the plane.
They got a tug and brought the plane back to the terminal or something?
They towed it in. Yeah, I think they towed it back in and took them off. This one in particular, I'm not losing a lot of sleep over because it was a super old plane.
Right, it's not a brand new plane.
But still, you would think maintenance would check those once in a while. I'm the only idiot that actually checks the lugs on my truck and trailer before I take it out just because, you're supposed to, but no other humans do.
Because you should.
Yeah, I'd like my wheels not to come off.
Alaska Airlines is saying they found lots of loose bolts.
Most of them, I think, were loose.
That's crazy.
Yeah, no, that's insane. Crazy is being able to get 2 little bottles of Woodford Reserve on the flight at the same time. That's just crazy. Not checking the bolts is fucking insane. Let's not take back the word crazy for things that are literally batshit insane.
Design drove $10 million in pre-orders for Rabbit R1 AI hardware. Do you know about this Rabbit device?
That was a lot of letters in order there. Look, I know of it. I'm having a hard time understanding it, to be honest.
It's this little, like, red toy looking thing.
It's a little sex toy.
That's what I think too. It's called a rabbit. Don't you think that?
Yeah.
Don't you think a sex toy when you think of the rabbit?
I mean, that's what I've heard.
$199, no subscription, and it's a little AI guy who does your bidding. You talk to it.
I just don't see how this is going to work.
It has a large language model so you can talk to it, and then a large action model so it can execute various apps like your phone would.
Yeah.
So you tell it, I want to plan me a vacation. First of all, get me an Uber so that I can drive here and get me a reservation at this restaurant, and it'll do all these tasks. Plan me a trip to Europe. I want this kind of a flight. I want to be staying at this kind of a hotel, and it can figure out all those things for you, and you then get to review what it's found and decide whether or not, yeah, go ahead and book all that.
I mean, something like this is bound to happen. You know, Kurzweil talks about the merging of technology and humans and what he calls the singularity.
Yeah.
I really just think this is our next step towards WALL-E, which is how we're ultimately going to merge with technology. Like, this is just making us fatter and lazier. Like,
sure.
If the biggest impediment to your Hawaii trip is you booking your fucking Uber on your phone, maybe you should just go for a little run. Maybe you should just get out of the house.
Well, but technology always makes things easier. The Uber app on your phone made it so you didn't have to pick up the phone and dial somebody.
Sure.
And, they'd get the wrong information because you gave it to them verbally.
Sure.
Anything that gets rid of that human interface so I can very clearly, there's going to be no errors unless I make them, get exactly what I want.
Well, I'm not sure here. If you've got an LAM, this large action model, this thing's going to make errors. It's going to hallucinate things and make errors, which will be super interesting when you tell it to pick you up in an Uber and then all of a sudden $8,000 of Burger King is delivered via DoorDash. And you're like, no, not what I wanted. And like, we'll take it back. Like, no, don't take it back. I'm going to fucking eat it. It's already here.
I've already missed my plane, so I might as well be well fed.
Yeah, so this whole thing is interesting. I don't know. The dude who launched it talks about how it has to be hardware. He doesn't want to make an app because then he'd be, quote, giving his code to Apple, and that's somehow nefarious.
He sold 2 batches of 10,000 of these things over 2 days.
Crack. I think they've shipped that many, but they've sold, I want to say they've sold like 50,000 of these things.
Oh, pre-orders. $10 million worth of pre-orders,
I don't know how this works, especially if I believe their back end is like, they're just using OpenAI, an OpenAI model, and there's no subscription. They'll figure that out in time.
If there's anything that's ever screamed to me, just make an app. This is it. Why do I need a second piece of hardware for this?
Well, not that I'm excited about this particular device. I don't know it yet. I haven't seen it. I do think there's something to be said about a simpler device, and that's where my watch I thought would end up. I thought my Apple Watch would end up as a simpler device and I could use it in lieu of my phone. I want a simpler device. The watch is pretty fucking complex. The watch can do just about everything that I do routinely, not going to do my banking on my watch. It's more complex than I thought. I think having a simpler device is novel. That's something I could get myself into.
Great. Then put the large action model in your watch. I mean, your watch has tons of processing power.
If you made it smaller and lighter, more battery, maybe. I don't know. I think
I just don't think these people even have 6 months before this is knocked off as an app.
Oh yeah, I mean, they might not have time by the time the show releases.
Yeah,
we may be knocked off.
I don't need to see your source code if I'm Apple. I don't need to see your source code if I'm Google. I just have to have the idea, and then I can immediately go, yeah, let's make that.
If I try to read between the lines here, what he's saying is that their real value is in this LAM, this large action model. And my thing is, nobody has more actions than Apple and Google. And if they just got some users to opt in to action tracking, which would
give them a few hours, they can have it.
Yes, they'll have. No, they'll have it. They'll have it times 1,000.
Sure.
There's not really a lot to protect there, but we'll see.
I think the watch is probably a great place to put this thing if you're going to have a large action model and a large language
especially
model.
A large action model
perfect.
running in the cloud. I mean, that's my biggest problem.
Yeah.
My watch doesn't work well when asked to do AI tasks and it's not connected to the internet.
Apple Vision Pro has gone on sale. Did you order your Apple Vision Pro?
Maybe.
You're not telling?
No, I don't want a bunch of people with guns come over my house on February 2nd, allegedly.
To come and take your Apple Vision Pro?
Well, these things are like $5,000. There's a bunch of people picking them up in the store, and I'm like, I don't know about that. Do you really want to be walking out of an Apple store on Friday afternoon with an Apple bag? Like,
too obvious.
That says, come take my things. I don't know. The process is pretty interesting. I've been following a decent amount of the threads on Threads that people are talking about their experience and what's happened. It seems like the pickup was a problem during the pre-orders. There's a whole bunch of different headband sizes and light seal sizes.
You, right?
Yeah, it's pretty cool. There's like a face scanning app that works inside of the Apple Store app. on your iPhone, and it scans your face to then determine what size light seal you need, which is kind of cool.
What are your thoughts about apps? YouTube and Spotify are not going to launch Apple Vision Pro apps. Netflix is not going to. Meta is probably not going to.
Sure, they're not going to be out there in the first run. Maybe it'll take them some time.
Right.
This is a whole different paradigm for building things. I don't think folks...
What is the first run? It's under 200,000, right?
Something like that, I think, yeah. I feel like this is mainly for the early adopter fanboys and developers. And then there's going to be a Vision SE or something that'll come out in 12, 18, 24 months.
Two or three iterations down the road.
Yeah,
They'll actually make an affordable version.
Half the price.
Right.
But they're trying to get the ecosystem established.
Certain number of developers just will find it faster to throw their credit card out than to fill out that developer application.
Well, look, if you're really trying to build something here, throwing a couple grand at some goggles,
sure, who cares?
Is just part of the tax of paying to build this.
This was a completely unrelated story that we weren't going to cover, but I think it's kind of interesting. Apple's phone, the newest iPhone, it is OLED.
Yep.
So the actual LEDs are the actual pixels,
emitting light,
giving you the actual color, right? And so when you turn the color down, when you turn the brightness down, the color shifts.
Okay.
So you have to find a way to turn that down without making the color shift. And so what they do is they turn it off, turn it on, turn it off, turn it on. They're strobing it at you at whatever rate so that you're just seeing less of it, and it appears to be dimmer.
Interesting.
They were flashing it 240 times a second.
Okay.
So basically you can't tell how bright this light is that's flashing at you.
Yep.
And people are complaining that they look at their iPhone at night before bed and they can't sleep.
Because they're putting black in between. I mean, don't most people, myself included, when staring at their existing devices, be it a TV, iPad, phone, whatever, don't you have problems sleeping at night? Like, haven't we sort of resolved that it's
I don't know, because I don't.
That it's the blue light?
Researchers at the University of Manchester in the UK don't think it's the blue light at all. It's not settled there at all. They think it's the yellow light. The yellow light is worse. I'll put a link in the show notes with to a Time magazine article about that.
I've definitely noticed a difference between me staring at screens before bedtime and not, and how I fall asleep. Yeah. This is super interesting.
I do want to do a segment about sleep shortly.
For sure.
Okay, enough with the headlines. Up next, we're going to talk about the weather.
This show, I quit.
It only seems fair that if you can have an episode where you talk about typos, I should be able to have an episode where I get to talk about the weather.
Just to get rid of the few listeners we have left?
Just to scare the final people away. Exactly.
Is next week taxes?
Maybe. We've been having crazy weather all week, and since today's Observe the Weather Day, I thought we could look at how we forecast the weather.
It's not crazy. It just rained. Are you talking about in Southern California or just at large?
Well, I was meaning the whole country.
Oh.
I mean, it's been freezing in the center.
I don't think about those people.
Let's talk about how we have predicted weather historically.
Yes.
In fact, kind of an interesting way that is still predicted. There's a cat weatherman of Hiroshima.
What?
In Hiroshima, Japan, a ginger cat named Yuno Gaya is a local celebrity for his uncanny ability to predict the weather.
First of all, it doesn't sound right to call this cat a ginger cat. Isn't that a little derogatory?
Yugonaga would curl up and sleep soundly before sunny days, but restlessly pace and meow before rainstorms. His owner started documenting Yugonaga's forecasts, which turned out to be surprisingly accurate. Tourists and locals alike began relying on Yugonaga's purrs and paws to plan their days, making him a beloved weather icon.
And basically, he could just detect changes in atmospheric pressure. Is that what we're talking about here?
That's probably what he's doing.
Like the dog that barks before the earthquake comes, and you realize it just hears the P wave.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Or it could be sensing the amount of moisture in the air. There's a number of ways that you could get a local forecast from.
This is why nobody talks to me at parties, because I just go over to wherever their shitty make-believe story is, and I'm just like, well, here's what's really happening. And
just blow it.
I'm just like, can you please go away?
Well, here's a hard one for you. Puxatani Phil. On February 2nd each year, Puxatani holds a civic festival with music and food, and during the ceremony, which begins well before winter sunrise, Phil emerges from his temporary home on Gobbler's Knob.
That's a softball.
And according to tradition, if Phil sees his shadow and returns to his hole, he's predicted 6 more weeks of winter. And if Phil does not see his shadow, he's predicted an early spring.
I only have one thing to say about this. Is it too early for flapjacks? It's the only comment I have.
Such a good movie. Such
a fantastic film. And that line delivered by such a fantastic person.
Rick Overton.
Mr. Overton.
And then we have all the sayings like closed in the morning, it'll be pouring. So there's flowers like dandelions and tulips that close their petals in the evening. And if they don't open them back up in the morning, you could have rain on the way. And the theory is that they don't want to get their pollen wet
Oh,
or
interesting.
moist,
Yeah.
so that it can stick to bees, whatever, and they can, propagate.
I was looking at a channel on OnlyFans the other day called Moist Pollen.
Is that right?
Nope.
Red sky in the morning, sailors take warning. Red sky at night, sailors delight.
Okay.
Open pine, weather's fine. Pine cones, the same thing. If the pine cone opens up, then you probably have no moisture in the air. And if the pine stays sealed, they're waiting until it's dry out again.
And here I've just been going to the Carrot app on my cell phone to get weather when I should be
you could
consulting pine
you could actually
cones.
just go to the weather app. There's an old thing about a ring around the moon.
Okay.
Luna Corona. If you're sitting around the campfire and you see a ring of light surrounding the moon, snow or rain is likely on its way.
Is that true? Do any of these do you have percentages on any of these?
I don't think these are probably batting high.
Punxsutawney Phil's got to be
think-
sub 300, right? I mean, you would think he'd be 500, but
Pretty horrible, yeah.
Right?
Rodents predicting weather.
do you think Punxsutawney Phil actually knows what's going on? Like he knows this game, and then he just comes out just to fuck with people and goes the other way?
I think he's got to be super stressed. He's being awoken from a sound sleep and held up in front of a crowd.
Good point.
This poor animal.
Yeah.
So the Dodgers are on a while back, and the announcers are discussing whether or not an upcoming game is going to occur because of the weather forecast.
Okay.
And an older former baseball player announcer says, "What do the weatherman know?" Ha, ha, ha. And Joe Davis, one of our younger announcers who's much more science aware, says, actually, they know a lot.
Yeah, of course. I like how I'm now currently grumpy when the rain forecast is off by 30 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
They're predicting rain 3 days ahead of time. I'm like, well, they said 1 o'clock and it's 2 and it's not here yet.
Do you ever look at open weather and it tells you it's going to start raining in 10 minutes? Does it stop raining in 45 minutes? It gives you such
crazy.
amazing local data.
I use this a lot as I was camping this past weekend. I use it to know how terrible it's going to be when we're out camping, and it helps.
Did you get rain when you were out camping?
We did. Not that bad, but it did enough to make it messy.
We had crazy rain here, and I thought about you.
Not nearly as much as you guys got here.
So how do modern scientists forecast the weather? Maybe we could have more data points than a cat and a flower.
Well,
how do meteorologists get their data?
I mean, I'm assuming it's much more advanced. I'm assuming they have a webcam pointed at the cat, and then they look at the cat,
Yes,
and then
yes.
depending on what the cat does, they then have software that interprets the cat. There's an AI model that says the cat is currently curled up, and then it says it'll be sunny.
And that's how we know the weather. That's how your guy on Channel 5 is telling you the weather. Who's the woman on Channel 11 who dresses in the short like she's going to a club? And there's like a drummer behind her.
What?
The sound of like drums are playing behind. I really want the drummer to be on the set.
Sure.
And the camera pans over and you see the drummer just sitting in the corner going at it.
I have never seen this.
So, some of our weather reporters in Los Angeles are not really meteorologists.
Sure. Yeah. Big surprise. Something in LA is fake. Weird.
Shocking.
Weird.
Weather forecasting has improved over the years.
Yeah.
The 7-day forecast can accurately predict the weather about 80% of the time.
That's impressive.
And the 5-day forecast can accurately predict the weather approximately 90% of the time now.
That's really good.
However, a 10-day forecast or longer is only right about half the time.
Yeah. So basically, what you're telling me here is I should stop looking at 10-day forecasts because you're flipping a coin.
We're going to get better.
Of
But
course.
we're not great at it now.
But today I should just go with a cat.
Yes.
Okay.
Hurricane tracking has been improved by 30 to 40% since the 90s.
Hurricane tracking is insane.
Yeah.
Like when you see the maps and they're telling you with accuracy measured in the tens of miles where this thing's going to land. That's just incredible to me.
And it's fascinating how they gather the data and where the data centers are. We'll get to that in a second.
I have questions about that.
We get this data extremely cheaply.
Okay.
All this weather data we get very, very inexpensively.
Alibaba? Did you go on Alibaba and buy it?
Yes.
Okay.
The annual budget for the National Weather Service, the NWS, is approximately $1.2 billion.
I'm sorry. I thought you said we get this data pretty cheaply.
For what we get, hang on, you're going to see how much data we're
Okay.
getting.
All right.
The NWS is part of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, which is an agency of the Department of Commerce.
That makes sense.
The first set of data we get is from the Automated Service Observation Systems.
The ASOS.
Yeah, there's around 900 of these around the country.
Okay.
They're primarily at airports. They give us temperature, air pressure, humidity, cloud cover, wind direction, and wind speed, automatically reported back to the National Weather Service.
Okay.
That same data is also broadcast on a special radio frequency for pilots to gain intelligence about their destination airports.
This sounds super smart.
That's how they know before they take off, oh, there's rain there.
Yeah, what they have to be prepared for when they hit the ground.
Then there are the unpaid volunteers. Precipitation, snowfall, all of that is measured mostly by hand by civilian volunteers. We don't have a way of doing it in an automated way that's as accurate as we have right now, getting it from civilians.
Really?
They operate 9,000 cooperative observer system sites across the country, and they each follow a very strict protocol to report their daily measurement to the NWS.
I assumed most of these things you could automate, like even like special precipitation. I thought that you had like little test tubes that would capture water and then tip over or something like that.
It's mostly done by hand. The data is crucial for establishing long-term weather trends.
That's impressive. These people deserve awards.
There's also a group that are called Skywarn.
That sounds way more interesting.
Yeah, there are 350,000 volunteers trained by the NWS on how to identify and report severe weather, like tornadoes, hail damaging winds and flash floods.
I wonder if the training for this is like the opening scene in Ghostbusters where they show them pictures and they're like, what is this? And he's like,
True, false.
It's a tornado. And he's like,
the
I'm
polygraph.
sorry. Exactly. And you just zaps them. That's how I envision this is going.
These reports complement radar data and help the NWS issue more accurate and timely warnings for communities. Skywarn's contributions have significantly improved the accuracy and lead time of severe weather warnings, saving countless lives and reducing property damage. They serve as a critical early warning system for communities, allowing them to prepare for severe weather threats.
I am interested just because I'm old. Like, I get how they do this now, right? This sort of interconnect is so simple now with IP. Like, that part's not even interesting.
How did they do it before?
How did they do it before? 40 years ago.
I can't imagine.
Right? Like,
I can't imagine.
Were they just phoning in reports and somebody was tabulating them?
I'm not even sure this could have existed 40 years ago.
Yeah.
It's amazing the supercomputers they're using now can even crunch this much data.
Just a big array of Raspberry Pis?
That's what it is.
That's if you set it up, that's what it would be.
You're going to like this one because this one is planes that gather the data for us.
Yeah.
The Aircraft Meteorological Data System.
Yes.
You know about this.
I do.
Tell me what you know.
There's a couple things. I think where you're going. I participate in some of the aircraft ADS-B data, the tracking data. Is that what you're talking about? No, wait. You're talking about weather.
No, I'm talking about weather. I'm talking about actually in the airplanes.
Oh.
There are 43 airlines around the world who participate in this, including
I don't know about this.
Including the major U.S. commercial airlines like Delta, American, Alaska, Federal Express, who collect high-altitude meteorological data in flight.
As a quick aside, I just booked a flight to Orlando on Federal Express.
Did you?
Yeah. They're really cheap.
Federal Express and UPS fly a lot of planes.
But they asked for my weight and how small I could fold into a box, which I thought was odd.
That seems a little strange.
Anyway.
They communicate this data via satellite or VHF radio.
Is it all automated? I'm assuming it's automated.
Yeah, sure. The data is crucial to the accuracy of forecasts. There is no alternative to economically gathering this much data.
That's insane. I mean, it makes a lot of sense.
In fact, forecasts became meaningfully less accurate at the start of the pandemic due to the loss of much of this data as air travel took an enormous downturn.
Do you know, there had to be like, 2 orders of magnitude reduction in travel, right?
The International Air Transport Association reported that global passenger demand fell by 58%.
Wow. That's really fascinating. And does that go back to NOAA?
The Aircraft Meteorological Data System, which is reporting to the NWS, the National Weather Service.
Got it. That's super cool. Makes a lot of sense, too. You already have them they're flying around. Why not kit them out with a little bit of extra, whatever, a couple grand with a gear?
And basically, you're getting all that data for free because they're already up there. Now, think about all this data collection we've talked about so far is happening in 2D.
All goes into Excel.
You're getting stuff. You're getting stuff that's about 31,000 to 41,000 feet from the planes.
Sure.
The things that the humans are collecting is mostly on the ground. So mostly you're getting 2D. This is the next one is our first sort of 3D, and even then it's not much 3D. The National Weather Service operates 160 high-resolution Doppler weather stations.
Okay.
And that's your Doppler 7000 that you hear about on Channel 7 or whatever it is.
Everybody's got to brand it.
Each one of these emits 7 seconds every hour of quick bursts of energy and then spends the rest of the time listening for the energy to return to interpret what's in the sky, water or air.
Okay.
Most metro areas of the U.S. are covered by these radar, and the system increased average tornado warning times from 4 to 11 minutes.
I've learned a couple things. One, I didn't know that they had this many. 2, I didn't realize the plural of radar is radar.
I don't know. Maybe it is.
I don't know. It seems weird to say radars. 160 high-resolution radars? No.
Radars.
Maybe well, you said both. I don't know. I can't be sure.
Nevertheless, there are gaps in the coverage. Some of the most important coverage, however, is around what's called Tornado Alley.
Yep, the Midwest.
Now, this gets fun. We have satellites also.
We do.
Geostationary satellites. NOAA's Geostationary Environmental Operational Satellites, or GOES.
Isn't it called Gozer?
Out of
Ghostbusters.
Ghostbusters.
I feel like they're paying homage to Ghostbusters.
They might be. They orbit approximately 22,000 miles above the Earth, and they provide a picture of what the weather is like right now. Geostationary means that the satellites orbit at the same rate as the Earth, and therefore they can collect near continuous images over the same area. We have a GOES West and a GOES East. Because they focus on one spot, they can particularly get information about severe weather. They also do some other things with relaying data from other weather stations, some communications functions that they serve. Information from the GOES satellites help forecasters understand how quickly a storm, such as a hurricane, is growing and moving. They send down voluminous data of all sorts, including lots of imagery. We also have polar orbiting satellites. That's part of NOAA's Joint Polar Satellite System, and they orbit approximately 500 miles above the Earth, and they zip around our planet from pole to pole about 14 times a day. And because they orbit as the Earth is rotating, the satellites see every part of the Earth twice each day.
That's fascinating.
Polar orbiting satellites can monitor the entire Earth's atmosphere, clouds and oceans at high resolutions by watching these global global weather patterns, polar orbiting satellites help meteorologists accurately predict long-term forecasts.
Yes.
That's how we get our 7-day forecast.
Questions. How many of these are up there?
5, and then one that's jointly operated with Europe.
Okay. Second, I got to believe these aren't just gathering weather data, right? I mean,
As far as I know, it's only weather data.
isn't this like what we would do in the
Spy data.
Cold War? We'd be like, oh no, it's just capturing weather. And meanwhile, there's a whole part that says, do not look inside.
I think at this point we have so many other satellites.
Yeah.
I think you can actually focus on the weather.
And then second question, what's the over-under on when one of these things collides with a Starlink?
Sure.
Some Starlink Musk orbiting bullshit.
I don't know, and they're orbiting very, very
Yeah.
quickly because they're getting around the Earth 14 times a day, so they're hauling.
Anything in orbit is hauling. Nothing in orbit. There's no like old Edsel in orbit that's like, oh, that thing's only doing 70 miles an hour.
We also have a deep space satellite, NOAA's Deep Space Climate Observatory, DSCOVR is the acronym. It's
cute.
Orbits 1 million miles above the Earth and provides weather space alerts, forecasts while monitoring amounts of solar energy absorbed by the Earth every
like
day.
solar flares and things. I'm like, what doesn't make any sense to get farther away from the Earth and then point a telescope back and be like, well, it looks like rain in Montana.
You get that's true. You get observations about ozone and aerosols in the Earth's atmosphere.
Sure.
There's a lot of information about that. The interesting thing about the GOES East and West satellites, the geosynchronous satellites, just the two positions, and right now they're currently being covered by GOES 16 and GOES 17 satellites.
Okay.
The older GOES 15 sits along GOES 17 because GOES 17 has reliability issues. So we haven't retired 15. 15 is sitting next to 17.
Oh no, really?
GOES 14 sits powered down in a storage orbit in case something happens requiring a quick replacement because these things are so important.
So the entire staff of NOAA is basically like a dad of 3 kids that just like me that just keeps everything, and they're just like, well, we're just gonna keep GOES 14 powered down in case we need it one day. We never know.
Well, because who knows? Anything could happen to these things, and you need that data.
I get it. That is
desperately.
an 8-inch long piece of 2x4. I'm going to keep that. I never want to get rid of
exactly.
it. I might need that one day. It sits powered down in my garage.
In this case, they're very happy they have GOES 14 and GOES 15. GOES 15 is actually still doing work. GOES 18 was launched in March of 2022 to eventually replace GOES 17 to operate as GOES West.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, all your incremental cost is gone at this point, right? It's up there.
Yeah. Right, sure.
It's a couple extra hours a year to keep the thing floating around.
Exactly.
That's cool.
And these satellites provide the communications for the most remote observation stations in the National Weather Service's operations, which are buoys.
We have buoys?
Oh boy, do we have buoys. Wow, do we have buoys. And they have their very own website, which I'll link in the show notes. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, has 200 moored buoys that operate in harsh environments subject to powerful ocean currents, fluctuating strong winds, surging waves, sea salt, the sun's ultraviolet rays, cold temperatures, and even vandalism. There is a ship that goes around repairing these, and it's out at sea 6-7 months at a time, repairing, because these things get destroyed.
Sure.
And when it docks, it immediately offloads, whatever, and onloads whatever it needs to unload, and goes right back out to continue. I mean, it's like round-the-clock repair.
It is literally the ship version of painting the Golden Gate Bridge, isn't it?
Right. When you finish, you start again. That's precisely what happens.
Maybe they should make those things out of something other than cornstarch so they last a little longer.
Cornstarch and balsa wood. I don't know why you'd need anything more than that.
Yeah.
No, I'll put a picture in the show notes. You'll see these things are made out of steel. They are tough. We have buoys in the Great Lakes. We have buoys in the Gulf of Mexico. We have the buoys in the Atlantic and the Pacific, in addition to other data that give life-saving warnings of impending tsunamis.
That's amazing.
Every hour, they provide temperature and pressure data to the mainland. There are 1,323 stations deployed. 959 have reported in the last 8 hours. So that tells you how damaged these things can get.
400 of them are on holiday.
And they go around and repairing them. They're constantly being repaired. They put in new hulls. They power wash these things. They power wash all the shellfish that attach themselves to them.
Roughly how big are they?
Off of these things.
I'm guessing they're small, right? It's a buoy. It's got to be like what, like 2-3 feet long?
I'm going to give this to you in your unit. 7 feet in diameter and 16 feet tall.
Oh, that's not small at all. That's large.
And they're being held to the ocean's bottom with like a nylon cord that's 3 miles long. I mean, and they've got this special anchor they've created just for these purposes.
Interesting. That doesn't move around. They basically like giant, they're like outhouses. 7 feet around, 60 feet tall.
Roughly the size,
for like a large giant. Just floating around out there, collecting data.
I've not heard them described quite like that before. They provide data that's vital to fishermen, cargo ships, the U.S. Coast Guard, underwater operations, offshore drilling, platform managers, surfers, and coastal communities.
Love it.
It also is how we collect most of our climate change research because you can see it the most from the buoys.
Sure.
The buoys are generally placed about 120 to 180 nautical miles apart, depending upon their position in the array, especially around the equator. We have these really nifty arrays. And the engineers designed the buoys to be robust enough to persevere through significant significant storms. The placement of the weather sensors is very important. For example, the wind sensor has to be placed high enough to accurately capture wind speed by reducing the effects of air-sea interaction.
Interesting. That's why they're so tall.
Yeah.
Now, I'm assuming most of these are in waters that are near-ish to the U.S., right? We don't have stuff in like the Indian Ocean, right?
Oh, we have stuff all over the place. I mean, yes, it's mostly Atlantic and Pacific, but we do have buoys that are all over the place. And we actually have, like, South Korea allows us to have Doppler radar in South Korea, which gives us a tremendous view on another part of the world. It's really useful.
Yeah, of course.
Part of the problem with all this weather stuff is weather's not local. Weather's global.
Yeah, of course.
And so what you really need is all of the data from the entire globe. The satellites help with that a little bit, but you really need everything you can get.
I got to assume that radar data comes in handy too when somebody tries to lob a 8-ton ICBM our way.
I'm sure it's partially why we have radar stations there. It's not just
we'll tell you if it's going to rain. We also want to know if we're about to get blown up.
Board buoys collect wind speed and direction, wave height, movement, air pressure, air water temperature, dew point, and salinity. The data is transmitted in real time to the GOES satellites that we talked about earlier.
The GOESers.
And it's made available on the National Data Buoy Center website. I'm going to send you the link. This thing is fascinating.
Buoy data?
Buoy observations are also fed into computer models that the National Weather Service meteorologists use to develop forecasts and climate forecasts. The observations provide forecasters real-time information that they can use to issue life-saving weather warnings to make crucial adjustments into aviation or marine forecasts.
Has anybody fed all this into like a current LLM?
Oh, it's coming.
And just say, tell us what
it's coming.
Just tell us what next year's weather is going to be. Just map it out for us.
I'll come to that in a second, but this is now the first. We're coming to how we do weather in 3D, which is amazing.
That's good because I live in 3D.
You're getting a layer of weather when you look at the surface of the Earth. You're getting a layer of weather when you're looking at planes from 31,000 to 41,000 feet. You get that same information basically from Doppler weather, although it's a different layer.
Okay.
Balloons give us weather in 3D.
Okay.
Every morning of every day at 6 a.m., a National Weather Service meteorologist in the middle of the U.S. releases a hydrogen and helium-filled balloon attached to an expendable radio sonde connected by 80 feet of string. The radio sonde is about the weight of a grapefruit and the size of a shoebox.
What is a radio sonde? Is it like the brains?
It's the
of
sensor.
Thing?
It's the sensor and the radio transmitter that gets the information down. At the exact same moment he releases his balloon, 91 more of these balloons are released across the U.S. And hundreds more are launched around the globe.
Well, now I have questions.
The data they seek is called upper atmospheric soundings. Over 2 hours, the balloons will climb to over 32,000 meters, drifting as much as 320 kilometers from their launch point. They take readings every 2 seconds from the various altitudes of pressure, temperature, relative humidity, and send it back to the weather station where they launched. And eventually they get too high and the balloons pop.
And they do this how often?
Twice a day. This happens twice a day.
And you said every day, every morning of every day at 6 a.m. Local?
6 p.m. is the other set.
Well, yeah, but like Eastern? We got time zone questions now.
It's actually 0 hours UTC and 1200 hours UTC.
Interesting. And then do they get them back?
They get some of the radio sondes back. They actually are packed with a return envelope in case someone...
Like an envelope. That's what I wondered. If you find this,
and they get about
awesome.
15,000 back a year of the 75,000 that they use. While the weather balloons can drift as much as 180 miles, they typically only drift about 30 to 35 miles downwind from their launch site. 1 or 2 missing weather balloons won't impact your daily forecast. However, missing many balloons could lead to a lot more errors in weather models and forecasts.
So you're putting up about 200 of these a day, and you're doing it every day, you said?
Yeah.
So it's 2 to the 2, and there's 3 to the 2 number of days in the year. So that's 6 to the 4.
Sure.
So that's a lot. That's 60,000 of these things that you're throwing out every year. It just sounds like a litter problem.
They're putting up something like 75,000 over the course of a year.
I feel like Ed Begley Jr. would be very pissed.
Maybe.
We found out about this.
Radio sondes allow researchers operating the weather balloon to track it because regulations from the FAA require that the balloon's operators record the position every 2 hours. You're going right through commercial airspace.
Yeah, of course.
Operators are required to provide traffic advisories to affected aircraft, specifying the balloon's known or estimated position, direction, movement, or altitude.
I mean, the odds are extremely low, but you do not want to hit one of these things.
I wouldn't want to, for sure.
No, not with anything in the air.
You probably wouldn't want to either. I don't know.
Even if you're a bird, you don't want to hit one of these things.
Even radar has trouble seeing it because the weather balloon doesn't have a ton of metal in it.
Super small.
And it's pretty hard for the radar to spot.
Yeah, you said it weighs as much as a grapefruit. It's got to be super small and light.
They're slow moving, and so you might see it on one swoop. You might see of the radar one, and you might not see it on the next, and then a couple more sweeps, and you don't see it, and then you see it again. So it's incumbent upon the weather people to inform the aviation world as they pass through 31,000 to 41,000 feet.
Sure.
You definitely wouldn't want them hovering around that range.
I want to see one of these things.
The balloons? Oh, there's tons of videos of them on YouTube. I'll
cool.
link a few if you're interested. Yeah.
This is super cool.
Once it gets above 60,000 feet, there's really no worry about it conflicting with aircraft until it comes down. And when it comes down fast. After about 2 hours of ascending, most weather balloons burst.
As it should.
The weather balloon can expand up to 20 feet in diameter when it reaches its bursting altitude.
Makes sense.
Because as it goes up, the air gets thinner.
Sure.
But the balloon is designed to expand at 20 feet in diameter. That's pretty cool.
That's crazy.
The radiosonde has a parachute allowing it to fall back to Earth safely.
That's super cool.
And then, of course, it has a mailing bag and instructions on how to return it.
Love it. And you said, how many of these come back? 15,000?
15,000 of the 75,000 sent out each year.
Oh, boy. So
mostly they consider these expendable.
One-time use, yeah. So either there's, 60-ish thousands a year that are just getting lost to the woods.
Sure, who knows where.
Or there's Radiosonde 76 on eBay who's got one hell of a collection that he's going to start selling. You can buy all these every day.
The National Weather Service also operates the National Hurricane Center located in Miami, Florida. Guess why Miami, Florida?
Because they have the hurricanes there, the Miami Hurricanes.
Because you're right in Hurricane Central. And it's a bunker. It's a complete bunker's bunker to survive the hurricanes that go overhead.
The hurricanes.
There's another one of those stations in Honolulu, Hawaii, and they gather ground data on hurricanes both upcoming and as they pass, literally as they pass.
Do you know, back to the radiosondes, do you know how they transmit? Like, do you know what frequency they transmit on?
I don't.
It's pretty far.
I know it's a ton of data, though, because they're sending out all that data every 2 seconds.
Yeah.
But the cool thing is you're getting 3D data.
Yeah, of course.
You're getting this data.
Path,
yes, in 3D. That information. It sounds really, like archaic. Like you're getting the weather from the balloon. What are you talking about?
No, you have a super smart sensor that's just, the balloon is just
quite sophisticated,
vector, right? Yeah.
Right.
It's the cheapest vector to send it up. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I'd be curious to see, because you gotta, if it only weighs a grapefruit, you gotta have a battery on there, presumably. I doubt it's a solar cell.
Of course.
It's probably a battery. Yeah, that's cool.
The battery probably only lasts, you have just enough battery to last maybe 3 hours or so. You don't need a lot.
Yeah.
There's the World Meteorological Organization, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
It's a specialized body of the United Nations, whose primary job it is to ensure forecasters around the globe can and do cooperate.
Okay.
Data sharing is mandatory among all WMO members, regardless of their geopolitical status.
Okay, I guess that makes sense. You want to get the data, you got to join. Yeah.
You can be at war with a country and still be getting their weather data.
Sure, because as it turns out, the weather gives zero fucks about your war.
Exactly.
Doesn't care about your cute little war.
And then all this data comes down and it's put into, it's crunched, the numbers are all crunched in supercomputers. And we just got a new one called Frontier.
Okay.
Do you know about the Frontier computer? It's not a full-time weather service computer, but it is used for weather modeling. And it does a quintillion calculations per second.
Wow.
Break that down. That's a billion calculations per second.
That's a lot of billions.
If every person on Earth did a calculation every second, it would take 4 years to equal what this computer can do in 1 second.
That's a lot.
Then there are 2 dedicated supercomputers. One is called Dogwood and one is called Cactus. Each of these computers operates at a speed of 12.1 petaflops. Your smartphone might do 650 gigaflops. So you'd need around 19 million smartphones to equal the power of one of those supercomputers.
That's amazing. Who owns these? These are all NOAA's?
These are all
No,
NOAA's.
Frontier's not, because Frontier does something else too.
Frontier's used for a lot of things.
Okay.
In Manassas, Virginia, that's the home of the Dogwood supercomputer, named after local native flora.
Okay.
In Phoenix, Arizona, is the home of the Cactus supercomputer, named after the desert surroundings.
Better than calling it sand.
More computing power equals better forecasts, and it's Moore's Law to the rescue again, because the more data power we get, the more we'll be able to know what's going on in the weather.
There are some really cool, this is all forward-looking that you're talking about here, but there's some really good sites, one in particular called WeatherSpark that I'll put a link to in the notes, that shows you, it does a great job of visualizing historical data, like over the past 100 years, just so you can get a sense of climate and snowfall and comfort zones over time in a given time period, a year, a quarter, a month, whatever.
Right.
It's super cool. So I think more data equals more better.
In the future, AI will help with all this data.
Yeah,
Supercharged data analysis, AI algorithms can analyze massive data sets of weather data much faster and more efficiently than traditional methods. This includes everything from historical records to real-time satellite and sensor data, allowing AI models to identify subtle patterns and relationships that humans are missing.
Yeah, of course. This is a tie into the story from last week about the LLM that looked at fingerprints, and it was widely believed that fingerprints on the same hand were not, you couldn't get from one to the other. They were unique.
Right.
And they fed it into an LLM or into a modern AI, and it was like, oh no, we can figure it out.
Not true, we got it.
And just looked at it a different way. I presume the same thing's going to happen here.
Sure.
That's pretty cool.
The thing scientists say is that landing a spacecraft on Mars requires dealing with hundreds of mathematical variables.
Yep.
Making a global atmospheric model requires hundreds of thousands.
Way harder. Yeah, of course.
But I mean, that's how we get the weather. It's really cool. I love the fact that there's so much data and we know so much.
I hope they feed this AI, of course, LA Story, because I want what it doesn't know. Like when it hallucinates, I want it to just tell me it's going to be sunny and just throw a bunch of sun up on the board. Yeah, I feel like that's a necessary step in training the LLM to really get it right.
All right, we have to get out of here. But quickly before we do, have you seen or read anything good this last week?
This past week? Well, sort of.
Yeah.
If you count the Lions winning their first,
Yeah, I do count that.
Or I should say their second playoff game in a long time. That was impressive. I'm not a Lions fan. I kind of am now, but just because of the bandwagon.
Sure.
But I have one piece of Lions paraphernalia, which is a T-shirt that I had made after their perfect season. You know about this? Did I ever tell you about this?
Yeah, you might have mentioned it once. Yeah, go ahead and say what it is.
Last name is Owen, and the number is 16, which is Owen 16, which I think is hysterical.
Hilarious.
And I think if they make it to the Super Bowl, as it turns out, their quarterback, Goff, is number 16. I feel like I'm going to have to change it from Owen 16 to Goff 16.
Sure.
And it'll be the changing of the guard.
Even though you're not a fan, you got to celebrate Detroit.
I mean, yeah, I actually really do enjoy watching these fans that have just, for their entire lives, have watched the Lions just be terrible. But that's not really the coolest thing I've seen all week. The coolest thing I've seen all week was getting out into, there's a spot in the desert east of Palm Springs that I took my boys to. That's super cool, and it's known as Painted Canyon. And it looks like a canyon that someone painted. And you have this it's like a mini Grand Canyon. It's very cool. I'll put some links in. I hope nobody listens to the show goes there because I don't have to fill up. It's nice that it's secluded, but it's super cool.
I'm glad you're keeping it a secret by telling people on this show.
Give it a different name. It's called Airbrush Canyon. Let's call it that.
You'll never find it. You'll never find
we'll
it.
See.
It's in Iceland.
But now is when I get embarrassed because you will tell me something much cooler that you've seen this past week.
I saw American Symphony, a deeply intimate documentary about a year in the life of musician John Batiste and his wife. As he attempts to compose a symphony and collects 11 Grammy nominations, his wife, writer Suliki Jawad, struggles with leukemia. This movie is tremendous, horrific, and gut-wrenching and glorious all at the same time. American Symphony on Netflix now.
And not a surprise to me, yours is better than mine, as always.
I don't know if it's better, but it's what a great documentary. It's fascinating.
It sounds amazing.
John Batiste was the band leader on the Stephen Colbert Show at the beginning. He doesn't do it anymore.
Oh, I didn't know that. Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's super cool.
In fact, he was on there when they announced his 11 Grammy nominations.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. I want to tell you I'm going to watch it, but it's unlikely because, as you know, I have 2 little children and I then have no nightlife.
It's a good movie when you get the chance.
I have no day life either.
That is the episode.
Thank you for joining us for all this nonsense. A truly terrible podcast from The Awful Company. Visit us on the web at nonsense.productions. I'm Stu Little.
I'm Jeff Parker.
If you like this program, please follow, download, subscribe, and like at Apple, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Spotify, our favorite Overcast, wherever you get your podcast or other tax information from.
Podcastindex.org. Special thanks to our floor director, Tara Chandler.
Thank you, Tara. We'll be here every Thursday morning for more nonsense. Please join us. Oh, the devil's bringing his packages to the house.